Hi everyone, today I wanted to talk about peperomas. I have a whole bunch of peperomas hanging out over here, and I decided to do a video about them because a lot of mine are flowering today. So I pulled a bunch of my different varieties together and we're going to talk about them a little bit. As you guys remember, in an earlier video, we repotted this unique Peperoma pink lady. You can see it has super pretty leaves with a little bit of pink coloring. This plant started as a plug, and I have been growing it since. It just got this repot, which, like I said, you can find in a previous video on my channel if you're interested in seeing about that. I'm not surprised this one isn't flowering yet. It takes a lot to get them to flower. They have to be happy, watered well, good light, things like that. Today we're up by my west window where I tend to keep most of my peperomas. Except this little guy actually has a spot downstairs under one of my good grow lights since he's so little. This one is called Peperoma Napoli Nights. And Peperoma Napoli Nights is actually a hybrid. I had to do a little bit of reading about it. I happened to just be walking through a big box store, and I always glance at plants. I should make a video about plant shopping one day because I tend to go all over the place and manage to find plants. But the Napoli is... I really like it because the undersides actually get red, similar like a Russo, but a little different. Not as red, but as you can see, it has red tones. And mine's a little bit light because on this window in particular, this guy probably gets slightly more light than what he would like. But as you can tell, he's very full. He's got super pretty leaves, and this little guy, he is starting to bloom. If you look down in here, I know you won't be able to see because it's so dense, but he has other spikes, which this is how their blooms look. A lot of people tend to cut these off. I personally let them go just because I find them interesting. A lot of people say it takes away from the appearance of the plant. It doesn't really hurt the plant either way. I mean, my peperomas all stay inside, so it's, you know, I'm not trying to pollinate from the blooms. But like I said, this is a hybrid. This is a Peperoma Napoli Night with, it's sort of looks like a frost a little bit, but it has leaves shaped more like, you know, a teardrop. But it is one of the plants I really enjoy. This is a jelly peperoma. I found this pretty lady on clearance at a big box store. I always swing down those aisles just to see what might be there. I have this whole issue with, I feel like I need to save or rescue plants if I can. I actually keep this one in a south window, but off to the side. So it really helps bring out the pretty reddish pink edges. But this one came with just, you know, a handful of leaves. It was not in very good shape. I actually thought it might have scale at one point. So it was getting numerous treatments on its leaves with cotton balls and alcohol swabs, which I can do a video about how I tend to deal with pests. But I kept this guy isolated for a little while, did a couple treatments, wiping down all the leaves, kept it away from others, and I'm not sure it actually had a true scale outbreak. I think a lot of it was just damage. Like if you can see, it had gone through a bit of a rough time, and it just got kind of beat up. But all of the growth looks good. I don't see anything, you know, on the stems, just some, I think, damage from hitting off like the container and obviously being shuffled around a lot. But this is a unique peperoma. It's got the longer leaves, unlike a lot of peperomas tend to have the shorter, smaller leaves. This one is very pretty, and you can see in here we've got some new growth coming up all over the place. So I very much enjoy that one, and I loved it when I happened to come across it. If you want to see one here with lots of blooms, pull this one out of its outer pot. This is my Peperomia Frost. Oh, and this is our cat Binks. He apparently wants to stop in and say hi to everyone. He really likes to come over and try to get my attention when I am tending to my plants. But anyways, this is my Peperomia Frost. These leaves, I have always loved this plant. You can tell it's a very happy plant. These are a lot of blooms going on right now. But I've loved this plant because you can see how the leaves are shiny, and actually when the light hits these just right, you will actually see them sparkle. They almost glisten in the sunlight with like the frost coloring. But as you can tell, this guy, he grows like crazy. I have trimmed him numerous times. Look at this. We have even more blooms coming out all over the place. And like I said, a lot of people would just trim these because they don't like to look at them. I personally let them go for a while until they start to die back, and then I'll trim them off. But I just love this plant. It's like most peperomas, it is so easy to care for. You know, you water them just when they're dry, you know, so you just kind of, you feel in the soil. If it feels damp at all, let it go. And another tip about peperomas that I found along the way is peperomas do not like their leaves to be wet. Maybe some people wouldn't agree with that, but in my experience with peperomas, they are much happier if you bottom water them, which is why all of mine are in these type of pots. Because I just pull them out and I sit them down in the water and I let them sit there until their soil feels good and moist, and then I let them drain really well, and then I place them back in their pot. Like this one is in a pot that my kids decorated for me, and he, you know, just hangs out in here in my west window and loves life. I love this plant. And who do we want to look at next? We'll give you guys a good story about this one. This is a watermelon peperoma. Tends to be a very popular plant. I found this guy on clearance with about 3 big leaves. like this, and a whole bunch of like little tiny stalks. He was in a great big 6-inch pot, which was way too big for his tiny little roots. He was obviously struggling. I mean, yeah, he had a couple big, really pretty leaves, but the soil was way too wet and it just needed help. So believe it or not, all of these leaves, like this entire group of leaves you're seeing here, is all new growth that has happened just since winter. So that would be roughly about 5 months now. And if you guys look real close, you can see these tiny little, so all its new growth starts out as these tiny little green specks, and it just keeps growing and growing. Like, we still have one stalk here that doesn't have any leaves yet, but it actually has a tiny little bit of green. So I'm holding out. I think it might actually join the rest and start growing some leaves. Now, as you can tell, some of these leaves are, you know, kind of a little misshapen. They're curling a little bit, or, you know, some of them don't have as much of like the watermelon striping. And honestly, I really think a lot of this, like, see, this one even has like a spot, but it's smooth. I think a lot of this is just because this poor plant was so waterlogged, and I pulled it out of the big 6-inch pot, put it in a smaller pot back, you know, several months ago. I gave it a couple good like doses of hydrogen peroxide and water to really try to promote oxygen to the roots to help this plant. And I think a lot of this is just the plant was struggling to survive. So I have some funky, misshapen leaves, but as you can tell, as it's continuing to progress, we're getting a lot more, you know, traditional Peperomia watermelon looking type leaves. So I think as this plant continues on its journey to wellness, which I am sure post about this again. This has been one of my happy success stories. I really thought this was a goner. It was on clearance for a couple dollars, so I grabbed it because I was like, oh my gosh, this beautiful watermelon Peperomia just can't be left to die like this. So too bad I don't have a picture to show you guys. I use the Greg app to track all of my plants and its progress and watering and things like that. I'll actually have to go look and see if I have an original picture of this plant. This might be one I acquired before I started using an app to manage my plants, but love this. Here is another one that, as you can see, he came with damaged leaves. This is actually a Golden Gate Peperomia, or you can, you know, refer to it as a variegated Peperomia. I love these leaves. They have, you know, a creamy yellowish color with green blended in. Some have a little more. This large leaf that it just popped out has a little more green. You know, some have more cream. But this was also another guy who came to me in a very rough condition with a few leaves, some that looked like it could have been scale. you know, because when you get leaves that have like holes and you can see the damage, and when they've got marks on the back that look like this, you know, and you're going around on your plant and, you know, you see a spot, you know, like things like this, like you see this spot and, you know, you're going around and you're scraping it and you're touching it, you know, is it raised? Is it not? Is it, you know, you're trying to determine if it's scale or something like that. With this plant, as well as some of the other ones I mentioned, I treated it with the alcohol swabs, kept it away from my other plants for a little while. It was under a grow light. You can see we're just getting all kinds of new growth. All of these leaves from about here up is all new growth. So I've been very pleased at how well this plant has done. And I just love the leaves and the colors. So I hope he just keeps on growing. Like, look at this. This is a half leaf. I don't know if you can see. It's a half leaf that's just been hanging in here, one of his original leaves. Because I don't like to remove stuff unless it's really in bad shape. Especially with variegated plants. You know, they can't absorb as much sunlight, so they need extra sunlight. And because of that, this guy is actually in I have a shaded south window, but it also has a grow light by it, so he's in that spot. So he gets some sunlight during the day, and then he also gets grow light supplemented the rest of the day to make sure. This is probably why we're seeing such nice pretty growth on this guy. I mean, he's to the point I could start probably taking a few of these leaves off if I wanted and propagating, which I'm going to show you today. I have one more peperoma I want to show you guys in my collection, and then I'm going to show you some of the ones I've been experimenting with and trying to propagate from. Last one I'm going to show you today, also you can tell is a very happy plant. We've got a lot of blooms. This is an emerald ripple peperoma. We got lots. I don't know if you can see the small growth in here. We've got lots and lots of growth. I love looking at the little leaves. I think they're so cute. And I love this red color, but the leaves are definitely very emerald. I almost thought it was going to be a more reddish one at first when I got it, when it was really tiny. But it's definitely emerald. It's a dark emerald. And I love it. And with the sun in the background, you can see the sun is setting, and you can see just how, you know, the leaves almost take on a little bit of a red color when the sun hits it just right. But these guys, it's kind of crazy. This one has been probably blooming the longest. You can see, like, if I can get close enough and get it to focus, you can see how these are really, like, this one is very dense and you can't see any separation in the bloom. This one, it almost looks kind of fuzzy. You can see all the individual blooms, and they actually have a smell to them. Can you guys see how that one, like this one, has been around longer? See how it's kind of fuzzy looking versus this one. This is a newer one that looks, you know, very smooth. And they have kind of this strange smell to them. I can't even describe what it actually smells like, but they actually have an aroma as they bloom. But some of these ones that are getting like real big like this, I don't want, like these will start to die back soon, so I'll be trimming some of these off, especially this one. This one's already starting to, oh, see, this one came off all by itself. But they are, I like them. They're neat blooms. I have a funny story about my baby rubber plant. Has blooms like this, and one of these actually fell off my baby rubber plant, and it like kind of shriveled up and was all like curly and fell down a shelf to another plant. And here was me coming along, going through one of my plants, and I jumped probably a mile high because I thought there was a worm or something in my plant. I'm sure it was a sight to be seen if you were there to witness that in person. But I like to cut them off before they fall off, because I don't want any more instances like that. So last thing I was going to show today is how you can propagate these by their leaves. So this was a watermelon peperoma leaf, and I believe this other leaf fell off of my pink lady. And I like experimenting with plants just to see what happens. So I cut, it had, remember how I mentioned it had big leaves that were not so great looking? So it had a bad leaf, and I cut the like really not good looking part off. And I'm going to gently kind of try to get some of the dirt off of this so you guys can see this. I stuck this in the dirt, this half a leaf, and you can see it is actually growing. I don't know, can you see the little tiny green sticking up there? Those are actually little tiny leaves starting off the back side of this. You can see there's roots. I really should probably put this back in the dirt before I harm it, but look at this. These are little tiny peperoma, watermelon peperoma, growing from a half a leaf that I first put in spag moss and just kept it moist in a closed container. And now I have switched it over to cocoa coir with a little bit of perlite in here. And I like to reuse just plastic containers for stuff like this, because you get so many plants, sometimes you start running out of places to put them. And like I said, I kind of like to experiment. So once I noticed this guy was growing, you know, some roots and had a decent, you know, number of roots, I moved him to dirt. And this is the first time I've pulled him out since he's been in dirt. And to actually see those little leaves growing back there is really cool. I'm definitely excited to see those emerge from the dirt as it goes. Now this guy, like I said, this was a leaf that fell off of my pink lady. And I was just like, oh, well, I have the watermelon in, you know, this spag moss, so I'll just stick this one in with it. Why not? So you can see we've got really tiny, fine roots. So I decided since I moved the watermelon to dirt, I was gonna go ahead and do the same thing with this one. And we're getting leaves. I mean, we're getting roots. I don't see any leaves yet. I've been keeping this clear lid on here to hold a little bit of moisture in, and I just keep the soil a little damp. But that is all I wanted to show you guys today, and I appreciate you tuning in. Here are all the peperomas I showed you guys today. Like I said, one of my favorite plants. There are a lot of plants in this family. I am sure I will still have lots to hunt down. I'm one of those, I like to go places and just see what appears. I do order a lot of plants, but I also am a, I guess, plant shopper of opportunity, and I like to see just what pops up. And I also kind of like to test my knowledge when I'm out shopping. I like to see what I can find and go from there. So if you guys have any peperomas you want to share, or any comments, any questions, please let me know. Thanks.